Hello, everybody, and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. Good morning to everybody in the West, and good afternoon to everybody in the East. I really hope that the next 45 minutes to an hour is going to be really beneficial for you, and you're going to go away with some really exciting and fresh ideas. We all have a common goal in this industry, and that is obviously to keep costs low. We want to keep revenue high, but we want to keep fundraising really fresh. So the purpose of the next little while is to look at cost-effective ways to increase donations at your next event. My name is Jack Wrigglesworth, and I'm the Head of Business Development here at Givergy. And today we have the luxury of a special guest joining us, co-hosting, Harry Santa Alaya, MC and fundraising consultant based out of New York City. Now, Harry has got some really, really exciting stories and feedback to give us today. So say hello, Harry.
Hello, everyone. I'm indeed based in New York City, here in the land of the free and the home of the brave. And really looking forward to the next 45 minutes to an hour. And I'm sure that, well, hopefully some of you will get some really useful information out of it. And Jack and I go a long way back. I think it's 6 or 7 years now, Jack, isn't it?
I think so.
Just quickly, I'm sure a lot of people are wondering: have you airbrushed that picture? I feel like that's
is it no filter? No filter.
No filter. Yeah, right. Hashtag no filter. Jack Wrigglesworth. Now I'm looking forward to today. It should be a lot of fun.
Thanks, Harry. Thanks so much. So, everyone, we are live today, so please feel free to tweet any comments, thoughts, suggestions throughout the next period. We are going to have a bit of a Q&A session at the end, so if you do have any questions, we will try and cover them. But if you do want to tweet, please do so at GivergyCA, hashtag raising more. We also do have we are recording today's webinar, so if you have any colleagues or what have you that would like to listen in at a later date, we will get that recording to you, so that's no problem. Now, as for today's agenda, first things first is what makes a good MC, and that is a key question asked by so many of us in this industry, and I hear it a lot, especially over in the West. So that's definitely a question that I hope Harry and I can answer during this webinar today. We're going to look at tips to help you communicate your goal effectively. We're going to look at how to create an environment that's competitive, which is really, really important. And we're going to look at that silent majority and how we can engage that kind of 60, 70, 80% of your guests at your event. So I can see actually online here that I recognise a fair few names, which is great, so welcome. Thanks for listening in. I can also see a few that I perhaps don't recognise. So for those of you that are familiar with the Ghiberti system, do excuse the next slide, but for those of you that are a bit unfamiliar, this may be a little bit nice and beneficial for you. So in the last 12 months at Givergy, we've raised in excess of 75 million. We've supported over 1,500 events globally for 1,200 incredible causes, which is fantastic, and that's why we love what we do. So just as a bit of a quick fire round to make sure that I haven't put you to sleep already.
It would be a disaster. 4 minutes into the
4 minutes into the
webinar, and we've completely lost our audience. And I actually love this question. Have you operated a pledge drive before? Because the bottom line is every region has a different result in this one. We've done similar webinars in the past all over the globe, and it's always fascinating to see which regions actually utilize a pledge drive. So we'll see A, who's still switched on, paying attention, and B, I reckon it's going to be around about 65 to 70% have operated a pledge drive, which is great, but The bottom line.
I think I'd agree.
Always.
I think I'd agree. So yeah, so you've got an option there to click yes, no, or unsure. So if you wouldn't mind doing that, then we can get the results through in a couple of seconds, and it would be really interesting for Harry and I to see the results. But we will get that through in just a couple of seconds.
A few more to still come in. So just click again. Very simple. 3 options there: yes, no, unsure. If you're unsure, then you're probably on the wrong webinar, but 11% of you are. So that is interesting. We need to get that on track.
We need to clarify that, don't we, Harry, over the next little while?
58% of you have operated a pledge drive. 32 haven't, and 11 are unsure why they signed up to this webinar. Well, don't panic. Stay with us. We're going to help you raise a lot more money at your next event. And the bottom line is, when it comes to pledge drives, for me, it's like the first thing that is a no-brainer on any run of show for any fundraising event. It's such a simple way to get funds. So let's hopefully try and up that percentage towards the end of people who are interested in doing a pledge drive moving forward.
I hope so. So Harry, I'm going to bring you back pretty quickly with the first slide and headline being, the importance of doing your research. Now you've had a lot of experience, so how important is it to do your research to have a successful pledge drive?
Yeah, I mean, look, for me, it really is like anything. It's it's just one aspect of a fundraising event, the pledge drive. I personally think it's a massively important one. Every single event is different. Every single guest demographic is different. Every single run of show is different. Your messaging, your branding, they all are. But one thing that is absolutely certain is, just like with anything, the more research you can do and the more prepared you can be, the better the result will be on the night. And that's both financially, but also in delivering something, that's going to be fun and engaging for your audience. And, for me, a pledge drive, is no longer sort of a, laborious process that's like pulling teeth. And, no longer do we have to have these sort of old sort of paddle raise moments, which is a bit of a spectator sport. You have, 80% of the audience watching, 20% give. For me, a pledge drive is all about inclusivity and actually having a moment where you can bring a whole audience together and get everyone to do their bit, whether they're coming in at $25,000 or coming in at $25, just to say thank you to their table host. The key to making sure that you get as much audience participation, this is something we're going to be talking about later on, is getting your research done. And that starts with identifying your guest demographic. So, as I mentioned before, all of the guest demographics are totally different. The vast majority of gala dinners, you're going to have different levels of dispensable income in the in the room itself. And the key to a successful pledge drive, and I only ever measure the success of a drive, really by audience participation. I'm not focused just by the bottom line of how much has been raised in a pledge drive, because realistically you can hit targets with a handful of wealthy individuals. But by hitting a target with a handful of individuals, I still chalk that up as a loss if we haven't got the majority of the audience engaged with the drive itself. So I guess for me, one of the key, components of a successful, research and pre-event planning is identifying that guest demographic.
So Harry, I've got a question for you actually. So I've noticed actually a couple of people joining us today. We've got a school demographic, we've got a school event, but we've also got a sporting event. How does that affect your position on stage and executing this pledge drive? Do if you've got two different approaches?
Yeah, so I mean, look, the guest demographic, right? So let's sort of take a step back. You mentioned a school, so the first thing I do with any client is, talk through previous event data, including, guest demographic and run of shows. And the two most important numbers are A, how much was raised in a pledge drive if they operated one, and B, how many unique pledges actually created that sum. So if $100,000 was raised in your pledge drive, and you had 500 guests in the room, and you only had 50 unique pledges, or even 100 unique pledges, I'd see there's a huge margin there, an opportunity to raise significantly more. So what we would be doing there is working out where the pledges are coming from, and the guest demographic spells a huge part of that story. It actually sort of really helps people understand, okay, well, with a school event, the vast majority of the people in the room, in its very nature of a school event, are going to be very, very heavily linked to the organization. So these are going to be a significant proportion of people in the room are going to be, pledging emotionally. Whereas at a typical gala dinner, you only have about 20% of the room who are emotionally tied to the organization. They're people who have maybe had years of experience with the organization, or for one reason or another have been part of the organization for several years, and they're typically a table host and so on. They actually usually invite the vast majority of the rest of the guests. So those are the silent majority we'll be talking about later on, who are, let's be honest, the bane of every single fundraiser's life. They are the people that come to your event, they indulge in the food, they indulge in the wine, they enjoy the program, they have a dance, and they leave having spent nothing. They didn't pay for a ticket, and they leave having spent absolutely nothing. So that, for me, is the second type of pledge, and that comes from someone who's less emotionally tied, so I call them a transactional pledge. So your guest demographic will really give you an understanding of what sort of a pledge drive you want to deliver, because if you want to push an emotional pledge, that is going to appeal to the emotional audience, and those are people who are more linked to the organization. If you're looking for a high volume of lower donations from people who are less emotionally tied and going to deliver a high number of transactional pledges, then the push is far more in line with, if you're a guest this evening, now's the time to do your bit. If for no other reason than to just, to say thank you. Thank you to the table host. Thank you to the event planners for putting on the evening. And let's be honest, $50 or $100 is a cheap night. It's a cheap night out. But if you all do it, then we leave having smashed our target. So I hope I didn't, get too lost on your question there, Jack. But
no, I think we'll definitely come back to I want to come back to like the execution of it as well. Definitely, yeah. In a little while.
Sure.
But yeah, I think we've got a really good understanding of how important being able to understand that guest demographic.
Yeah.
But if, like you said, if we take a step back a sec and then look at pre-event,
yeah,
how does that kind of, we obviously want to analyze that past event data.
Correct.
Correct. And that's really important. So how do we do that? What kind of things do you look for?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, for me, the most important aspect, the most important thing to stress about a pledge drive is that this shouldn't be a moment where everyone rolls their eyes and they're a bit sort of like, oh, here we go again. This is going to be a lengthy period where I have to sit back and just watch, the wealthy people on the top tables give money. For me, we need to try and turn the pledge drive into a nice, short, sharp, efficient, fun, engaging, tasteful moment throughout the evening where it's like, I say throughout the evening, at some stage throughout the evening, during a run of show, and that's something we'll touch on, whereby we can get everyone involved in a fun way. And that's why Givergy is absolutely amazing. You can really develop a platform that allows everyone to feel included, and they can see their name flashing up on the screen. You can even gamify it and turn it into sort of a leaderboard of the most active tables, which is something we're going to talk about later on. But like I said, the first thing I do with every client is sit down and say, look, I need as much data as possible, because it helps break down and spell out a financial narrative of the past. And, you know, I've done 2 pledge drives in the last 2 nights, and both have been financially, but more importantly for me, statistically, huge successes, with doubling revenue from previous years. But most importantly, 2 or 3 times the amount of pledges have been made during a 6 to 12 minute pledge drive on each occasion, because we've utilized the past event data. And we've identified that very often there's a large silent majority of guest attendees that haven't either been asked to give something, which is a very British, you know, problem that we face back home. In my opinion, we put on these really fabulous events, you know, massive budgets and productions, and they're really incredible. But sadly, very often we very rarely ask for money, because we're too British about the whole process. These are your gala dinners. These are the most important evenings of your calendar year. We need to make the most of it. And I absolutely, I firmly believe, no matter how tenuous your link to an event as a guest, no matter who you are or why you're there that evening, no one should be leaving having spent nothing. Whether they are long-time supporters or whether they are guests who were invited, you know, 2 hours before because their boss dropped out. And it's our role as fundraisers and fundraising consultants and MCs and event planners and you know, all the rest of you on here, it's our role to make that happen, and to do so in a fun and engaging way. That past event really helps spell that out.
Harry, I've got a bit of a question for you, actually. Because you've had lots of experience on stage. Now, a common trend that we found here in Canada is that there's a tendency to host your pledge drive and perform your pledge drive after a live auction. I'm personally really interested, and I'm sure everybody else is, to hear your take on that, and how that affects, you know, what way round you do that in your run of show, and how that affects the, you know, the amount of revenue that we generate.
Yeah, to be fair, it's a really good question. It comes up quite a bit. And again, it's all about the utilizing data from the past. What, you know, how long have auctions taken in the past? How many items are in your auction? You've got to be understanding of your audience. That, you know, you do not want a fundraising fatigue. You don't want your audience tapping out, you know, towards the end of an auction, and then to try and deliver an effective fundraise, you know, pledge moment. So talking, you know, getting it right in your run of show is absolutely key. You know, placing these in at the right time is absolutely vital. And making sure that you have the right MC on stage to deliver it is really very key. But when it, you know, last night I did a pledge drive after a live auction, and if I'm honest, you know, I was uncomfortable with it. I didn't want to have the pledge drive after the auction, because the auction had 8 pieces in it, and I had a feeling it was going to drag on a little bit too long, and it did, truth be told. And you know, it lasted 40 minutes, which is far too long for an auction. And by the end of it, you know, I wasn't the auctioneer last night, but at the end of it, I then had to get up on stage, deliver a pledge moment where, you know, the biggest hurdle I had was actually getting the audience back on side and in a position to give. So
agreed. And it's because I imagine that there's only a very, very small percentage of people that make a contribution or can afford to contribute in that live auction. So a lot of people just switch off.
Correct. So a quality auctioneer, and bear in mind, you know, people completely misunderstand what a strong auctioneer is. A strong auctioneer is not someone who's got, you know, just a name behind them. There are some fantastic auctioneers at Christie's, Sotheby's, and all the rest of it. But the reality is that doesn't make them a strong charity auctioneer, because at these massive, you know, auction houses, a lot of these people, well, they are always auctioning to a room full of people who are there to purchase art. So that's the massive difference. You have auctioneers who are on stage selling art to people who want to buy art. Now, at a charity event, as you rightly pointed out, Jack, only 5% of the room usually are actually engaging in the live auction. So the key to a successful auctioneer at a gala is having the ability to, control 5 or 10% of the audience from a bidding perspective and get as much out of them as possible, whilst keeping the other 90% engaged and having fun and enjoying the process. And if you can manage to couple the two and keep that going, then you can deliver a successful pledge drive. But like I said, getting that right is really, really key. And if you have a big auction, my advice is to get the auction done, but then to have a break at some stage in some way or another. Maybe I don't know, maybe you can have an honoree or serve a new course or what have you, and then deliver a pledge drive so they are totally unique. That would be my advice. And another very, very important point is, part of the run of show is to identify that the live auction and pledge drive, very often the mistake is made that these are the climactic ending to a gala dinner, and that is not the case. That is where so many times I see it go wrong. Unfortunately, the final third of any event traditionally is, your audience is losing their ability to concentrate on your messaging. They are in, less of a giving mood. They are more focused on, continuing to drink and have a good time, or, they're already thinking about how they can beat the Uber rush, or, how much they owe the nanny on the way home. All of that sort of stuff, the babysitter and what they're going to wear for their meeting at 9 a.m. These are all things that are preoccupying your guests on the final third. So placing that live auction and the pledge drive earlier on in the program while they're still engaged is absolutely vital. And of course, like I mentioned, having the MC to bring it home is really key. And again, another area that I often see organizations go wrong, and the reason I got into this business in the first place, having seen so many gala dinners, is recognizing that there is a huge difference between a charity MC, auctioneer, pledge drive, a massive difference between that and a celebrity or entertainer or comedian and so on and so forth.
So Harry,
yeah.
On that note, can you talk about that experience you had a few weeks ago at Fighting for Philly?
Yeah, that's probably quite a good example. The reality is a lot of these MCs, a lot of these event planners and so on and so forth, they think, oh, well, so-and-so is a comedian, or this is a fantastic presenter, so they'll be good at driving the pledge or the auction. And the reality is that doesn't make, just because they're good at, they're confident enough to be on stage in front of an audience, or they can deliver a great performance or a song or what have you, doesn't mean that they're actually going to be effective fundraisers. So Philly Fights Cancer was a great example. They recognized that, and they invested in fantastic programming. I was in awe of their programming. The production was incredible. They had John Legend playing a set for an hour at the end. Whoopi Goldberg was hosting the event, and that was absolutely magical. But I was fortunate enough for them to see the value in investing in a fundraiser to deliver their live auction and their pledge drive. So I was fortunate enough to be driving their auction and their pledge moment, and John Legend did his thing for an hour on the old, tinkled the old ivory, and he was good. He had Whoopi Goldberg was hysterical and fantastic and engaging, and she was Whoopi Goldberg. There's very little else you can say. And then I did my bit for the pledge drive, and in 15 minutes we doubled the pledge from the year before, and we had 800 unique pledges made, and 2.1 million went through the Givergy system. So the event was absolutely executed how he wanted, and everyone played their role. Now, I'm not saying every event has John Legend and Whoopi Goldberg, and it's all relative. There's an event last week that was, their target was to get $10,000 in a pledge drive because they'd never done a pledge drive before, and I told them that just utilize this system and plug it in for a 5-minute drive and just watch what happens. And they ended up on $20,000. So relatively speaking, they were absolutely over the moon. But again, the key was recognizing and going through the stats pre-event of what's fair and reasonable to ask of your audience based on the event demographic. What have they achieved in the past? And how can we build a system, like with the Givergy platform, that's going to make the most of it, and having the right MC on stage to deliver that message and make it fun, absolutely key, Jack. Jack, when are we going to see you on stage as well?
When are you going to see me on stage?
Yeah, well, I mean, you're crying out for old Blue Eyes up there.
Thanks, Terry. We'll see. We shall see. Time will tell.
Right now, just making a slight note in your calendar, just to drop Jack a line and just gently inquire into whether or not he'll get up there, because I got a great feeling he'd crush it.
Thanks, buddy. Harry, you mentioned the Ghiberti system.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, you've been with Givergy from the get-go, and you know the system inside out.
Correct.
Does that help you significantly on stage because you know how the system works, you know the navigation that guests go through to make that pledge? Does that make things all that better for you in comparison to perhaps one of these, you say earlier, these TV personalities or this live auctioneer who's trying to host this pledge and not knowing the system? Do you think that, let me know your thoughts.
It's just like, it's educating, that's all it is. Yeah. The bottom line is, this is not just a shameless plug of Givergy. I really don't, I don't mean it to sound like that, but I've worked with everything on stage and I've worked with nothing on stage, just a paddle raise. But I really, hand on heart, firmly believe there is no better platform to deliver a short, sharp, exciting, fun, and engaging pledge drive. I really mean that. I absolutely mean that. Pledge cards, absolutely forget it. If you're still putting pledge cards on the table and you're not making the most of technology, then I'm actually very excited for you, because there is a huge opportunity to make a huge amount more revenue. When you think about a pledge card, that's essentially just asking someone to quietly leave $100 on a table or $1,000 on the table and fill in their details, and let's hope that that pledge card with your details doesn't just go missing or not get picked up, or even worse, get picked up by the wrong hands. Scrap that immediately.
And that's a good point, Harry. I mean, bringing you over to Canada and on this webinar today, there is that transition being made. We have got a lot of, pledge card, bid paddle, pledge moments still around. So as you said earlier, it's about that education and trying to, encourage potential organisations to make that transition.
And also the bottom line is, for me as an MC, utilizing the platform, it makes so much difference having something that's so simple, easy, and engaging to part with that cash. And instead of asking people to fill out pledge cards and quietly just sort of give their cards in, turn this into an all-inclusive moment. Givergy allows you to produce, on screen, this is our target tonight. We need to raise $50,000. We've got 6 minutes to do it. And the minute we do, we can crack on with the rest of our dinner. Or we're looking to raise 100 grand. Last year you raised 80, but let's be honest, only 1/3 of you got involved. I need everyone to get involved at this stage. And the thing about the tablet solution is that it is so simple. You pick up the tablets. When I encourage an audience to pick up the tablets, I know they're doing one of two things. They're either learning about your organization or they're making a pledge. You're not guiding them to cell phones. You're not guiding them to pick up pens and papers and pads and all the rest of it. You're picking up tablets, you make a donation, your name flashes up on the screen if you don't want to be anonymous, and then you turn to the people on your left and right and you help them make a pledge. And you can even, when you said, how can the MC, make the most of the platform, I love having things like leaderboards of the most active tables. Not saying how much has been raised per table, which Givergy can deliver. I prefer to have how many pledges have been made per table, and you can even gamify it a little bit, challenge the audience to raise even more, or to be more active, and display the goals and so on, which is something we're going to be talking about a little bit later on. But yeah, I mean, the bottom line is, Jack, yes, I know the Givergy system inside out, because I was there, you know, at the beginning back in London, in Notting Hill, made famous by Hugh Grant, in a little group of 5 of us, or 6 of us, I think, at the beginning. And it's come on, you know, leaps and bounds, and I'm now doing my thing on stage. But I really do mean it, hand on heart. I absolutely love having Givergy up there, but it doesn't mean I'm the only one who can deliver a great result with it. It's about making sure that you have educated your MC into how to use it. I always am happy to jump on the phone with any client of Givergy who's got an MC that wants to learn a bit more about, you know, key things that work well to say on stage, and things that you know, what types of system setups have worked well in the past, and structuring a pledge drive that's going to be effective. And I absolutely love fundraising. I love hitting goals. I love the competitive element. I love the inclusive element. I love the teamwork. And it should be a lot of fun. This should be a great process of planning, preparing, and then executing a great result.
Harry, I remember seeing a video, and actually, if everyone listening, I'm more than happy to send this video along. But I remember seeing a video at Charity Water, where that atmosphere in that room during that pledge portion was electric. You had people cheering, you had people clapping, you had people getting up off their seats, having a standing ovation, and that's exactly what we're after, isn't it? And you know, it really brings that room together.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, charity. I mean, there were people crying in that audience. That's nothing. That's just an amazing moment. And the reason why I love, you know, displaying the goals to the guests and challenging the room to audience participation and utilizing the system is that I love the idea of everyone feeling like they've done their bit. That's why it's a successful drive. It's not, you know, having an extra 100 or 200 guests giving $50 isn't actually, you know, let's say you're raising a couple of $100,000, you know, 100 people giving $50 is just an extra $5,000. But that, you know, which doesn't move the barometer a huge amount, it doesn't massively move the needle in terms of the bottom line figure. But what it does do is it means that a huge proportion more of your audience is leaving feeling like they've done something, feeling like they've been part of something great. And as you mentioned, Jack, that moment, that sort of like, right, we've done it moment on the Charity Water video, and I've been fortunate enough to be in the room many times when we've hit those goals and the whole room's gone electric. The great feeling about that is the all-inclusive element, and the fact that a lot of people will be leaving who traditionally will have probably left having spent nothing, but this year will have left parting with a little bit of cash. And then for you as an organization, that is a really awesome opportunity to reach back out and not only thank them, but try and engage them with future fundraising efforts. And so there's so much benefit to it. And you know, the bottom line is, we, you know, human beings, it's in our DNA, it's in our genetic makeup to want to help and to want to give. Like we really do. We feel great doing it. And that's why you can really make a massive difference to the overall event feedback and guest, you know, experience by just lightly encouraging everyone to do their little bit. And yeah, so displaying those goals and challenging the room is all part of that sort of moment of togetherness that you're looking for. And then, like I said, it doesn't need to drag on. This is not a long process. You know, make the ask, hit the goal, make it fun, make it engaging, and then crack on with the rest of the rest of your program.
So keep it quite short and sweet. So what would you recommend? Like I often say about perhaps a 7 to 10 minute period. Is that, you know, put you on the same lines there?
Yeah, I mean it depends again on the run of show and you know what the events delivered in the past. We wouldn't be able to raise 2.1 million with 800 unique pledges in 8 minutes at Philly Fights, you know, Philly Fights Cancer, for example. So we scheduled 18 minutes, which is on the higher end. Sometimes if you're asking just to do, you know, if you're asking the audience just to donate what they can, then, you know, bottom line is, you know, that's not a long pitch. if you're doing an incremental drive, and, you know, for example, the one I did last night, there were 5 different increments. It takes longer to get through them, but, you know, for me, an incremental drive is the way to go. It gives you the chance to sort of start at a high number and make sure that those who are giving at large numbers can get their hands in the air, and they can get that special recognition, and a member of the Givergy team can go over and make sure they get those pledges through the system and it's broadcast on the screens. You know, and then as you work your way down to sort of pledge any amount, it's towards the end that you're sort of saying, right, now's the part where absolutely everyone is this is your opportunity to get involved. We're now, you know, past the $1,000 level, past the $500 level. We're now just asking for something from absolutely everyone. And if we just move to the next slide, that's actually where, you know, motivating your table to work together as a team is really key. I'm not sure if you've seen that over in Canada, Jack. Have you had any experience where organizations have sort of gamified a pledge drive and you know, tried to get 100% participation per table and rewarded them for doing so?
Yeah, I mean, we're definitely getting there. We're definitely getting there, which is great. And the thing that we're trying to really do here is educate, similar to what you said earlier today, is just educate the importance of doing this and how it can generate, you know, such, you know, incredible results. I was just on the phone yesterday to someone who's hosting a golf day. Perfect situation for, you know, in a competitive atmosphere, to encourage these tables to work together as a team. So something slightly different, adding in a new feature. So Harry, with that, just on the, you mentioned silent majority quite a few times. Can you clarify that?
Yeah, so the silent majority, again, you know, it's the bane of you know, of fundraisers' lives. They are, when you break down an event, or even, you know, let's break down a non-profit. It's a business, right? You have fixed costs, you have variable costs, you have revenue streams, and you know, it's just a business. That's what it is. You need to remove the emotion of every decision made, and you know, the bottom line is the vast majority of people who work in the non-profit industry are, you know, empathetic characters, which is why I love to be, you know, working with them. They're not, you know, traditionally sort of sharp-toothed businessmen who are looking to sort of undercut and all the rest of it, but the reality is, at times you've got to remove the emotion of an event and look at it purely as a business. And even as a micro business, your gala dinner, that's what it represents. It's a micro business. You have your fixed costs, your venues, your variable costs of staffing, food, security, and then you've got your revenue streams. So like your live auction, your silent auction, your pledge drives, and these are, you know, we're looking to maximize those. And the bottom line is, when it comes to that pledge drive, again, you've got your sub-revenue streams. You've got 2 different types of pledges being made. You've got those emotional pledges of traditionally that 20% of the organization, or the 20% of the guests who may have a long time commitment to the organization, or might have been part of it for a while and invited lots of guests. And then you've got the other 80% of the audience who are just guests of those 20%. And those are the silent majority. They are the people that get invited to these events. Their tickets have been bought for them. They might even just be sponsors. So a sponsors table is all well and good, but the reality is 9 or even all 10 of them on that table haven't paid to be there. Their company have. And, you know, those are absolutely, you know, they're the targets. They are the silent majority. They should be giving money. And traditionally, they haven't. And that's not because they're not willing and able to. It's not because they can't give $50 to say thank you for an event. It's not because, you know, they don't believe in where the money's going, or they don't want to help. They're, you know, it's because they haven't been asked, or they haven't been asked in the right way. They've just been sort of given pledge cards, and, you know, they're welcome to fill it in if they want to, or they've been, you know, subject to watching a pledge drive of just the sort of high net worth individuals. And so the thing about Givergy is it provides this platform that allows absolutely everyone to get involved, and predominantly that silent majority you'll see will really, really engage. And they will be, it'll be a massive, much more volume at a lower gift level, yes, admittedly, but much more volume of gifts. And that for me is, the key to a successful drive is engaging that silent majority. Yeah. Actually, last night, I wasn't part of this event, but some interesting stats came in this morning of an event in San Francisco, and this was a client who had never done a pledge drive at their event because it's an award ceremony. Okay, it's an organization, the San Francisco Film Institute. They have some amazing, honorees and guests, and there's a huge amount of money in the room. But their focus is that it's not, it's not a heavy-hitting fundraising event, and so they don't, they've never done a pledge. They hadn't even thought to do a pledge drive, but they have done, small silent auctions. And when I spoke to the client, I was like, look, why are you're doing these silent auctions, but have you ever asked this audience to help fund this organization? I appreciate it's an award ceremony, but have you even posed the question? And the typical answer came back of, well, yeah, we let them know that there are pledge cards if people are willing to give and they'd like to give. And in the past, it's raised them about $9,000 in total, with about 600 guests, I think it was. Anyway, I was thrilled to see the stats come in this morning. Over $200,000 was raised in a 5-minute pledge drive. And all they did was they put the tablets out. They had a very simple pledge moment where they said, right, between this drive and the next drive, between this award and the next award, we're doing a 5-minute pledge drive. Let's see what you can do. They didn't set a target. They just said, look, let's see what you can do. Some of you will give tens of thousands, if possible. Some of you will give thousands. Some of you will give $50. But let's see what you can do. We got 5 minutes. Everyone was engaged. Apparently, everyone was engaged in the screens. And they got over 200 pledges and $200,000 raised. I mean, the client, I can't wait to jump on the phone with the client because there's nothing better than a told you so moment when it comes to a pledge drive.
So, Harry, you mentioned like Fight for Philly and a few others which have all got perhaps big names and large amounts of money being raised. But when we all know that everything's pretty relative. And we obviously want to increase participation at all levels, all events, all size and scales. And I want to bring you back to this St. George's Society that we spoke about a few weeks ago. Obviously a totally different, the opposite end to fighting for Philly, but everything is all relative, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, actually, funny enough, the St. George's event was the one I was talking about that happened last week, where, I think they've raised between $1,000 and $5,000 in the last 3 years of just having pledge opportunities, so people can give if they want to, and then the stats don't lie. Only 20% have ever only 20 gifts have ever been made, through whichever vehicle they're operating for their pledge campaign, be it on pledge cards or even just leaving the button live on the Ghiberti System and just alluding to it. They only ever had 20 unique pledges, and so it's kind of a personal organization for me, being St. George's Society, and they've been great to work with over the years here in New York. So I said, look, I'd do a free of charge event, and I bet you we can raise 20 grand from this event. And the client was very, very scared of asking for too much from the organization, from the guests. And so they said, no, let's start with 10,000. Now, even that would be incredible. And we finished on 20,000. Yes. When you compare that to Philly Fights Cancer or any one of the massive events that we support globally, financially speaking, it's not a huge success, but actually, comparatively speaking, year on year, it was a massive success for them.
Yeah. Well, that's incredible. That's really great to hear.
Yeah, but it's all part of the planning, isn't it? It's all part of that. Yeah. It goes right back to that very, very beginning point that we made of do your research, identify the guest demographic, what are the stats telling you from previous years, and don't be afraid to ask. I've got a very personal story of, this idea of being afraid to ask was my father heads up a an organisation in the UK for soldiers, for soldier. It's called the Army Benevolent Fund. So it's quite a big military charity. My father was in the army for 42 years, and it means a lot to him. But you know, my dad, you know, he's an ex-brigadier, and is exactly the cliche of an ex-brigadier. You know, he's sort of, you try and imagine, you know, what an old sort of bumbling. You know, I love him to pieces, but he would describe himself as a bit of a bumbling old sort of, you know, ex-general sort of thing. And he's too afraid of asking for money when it comes to these galas. He thinks it's, you know, it's uncouth, or that people won't understand the tablets, or they won't, you know, this, and that's a constant fear of organizations. We have an older demographic. What if they don't know how to operate it? Bottom line is the system is designed to be utilized by an older demographic who have dispensable income. And I remember saying to Dad, the real problem, the real painful thing about going to your events is you never ask for money, and you never do it in the right way. So, you know, he let me take the reins on one of the events, and, you know, the pledge drive went, I think they raised about £18,000 the year before, and we hit about £80,000 utilizing a pledge drive. It wasn't, you know, it wasn't, you know, through lack of, you know, there was a few confrontations between me and Dad pre-event, you know, about you've got to have faith, have trust that I'm not going to let you down, trust me, it's going to work out just fine. But the bottom line is, you know, I'm not the one communicating to the audience about where the money's going. That's Dad's job. Well, that's the other soldiers on stage who are delivering their messages and their experiences. You know, my role is to make sure that we bring home the money. And as long as you keep it fun, keep it engaging, keep it tasteful, there's always money in the room, and people are more than willing to give it. It's just you've got to ask.
That's incredible, and I think over the last kind of, especially half an hour or so, we've had some really insightful things from you, Harry. So, you know, very grateful for that, and I'm sure everyone on the webinar here is letting their imaginations run wild. So, what we're going to do now, I think, is now we're going to do another little quick fire round. Again, probably just to make sure that everyone's still awake.
Yeah, I've probably sent off to sleep, haven't I? Sorry about that.
You can talk, can't you, Harry? You can talk. But, you know, we do want, you know, would you now consider implementing a strategic pledge drive based on, you know, what Harry and I have been discussing over the last little while?
The moment of truth.
The moment of truth. So we are hoping for 100% yes, but I mean, we'll find out. In just a couple of seconds.
I mean, for me, it is a real no-brainer. You do not have to do a hard sell. You really don't. But I firmly believe there should be a pledge drive with every single event. Please also, people, remember to be firing in any questions you have. Please do send questions through, because we've got another
Q&A, yeah,
for questions and answers, and so we, you know, please do.
There we go.
100%.
100% people would now think about implementing a strategic pledge drive, and
that's actually, if I'm honest, that's going to look to people that we've set that up. We genuinely haven't. I'm grinning ear to ear. That's good. That's really great. Good. Get out there.
Awesome.
Many people. It's such a fun thing to do, and it should be something that everyone at your event enjoys being part of. You know, these are feel-good moments. People love helping. People love giving. They love being part of something good. And God knows we need it right now in this day and age. And you need to make the most of that opportunity, because they're a little bit few and far between. You know, light relief and feel-good moments at the moment. So why don't we jump on to some questions? Are there any questions coming in?
Yes. Yes, there are. We have had a few. Okay, so let's figure out what we've got. One here. So my guest demographic are comfortable and familiar with pen and paper pledge drives. How can I get them to embrace technology instead?
Say that again. They've become familiar.
So they're really familiar with doing a pledge drive with pen and paper, by the sounds of it. They write on the pledge cards, I would imagine, or do their bid paddles. How can we get them to embrace technology instead? And I think my bit of feedback is obviously it's dependent on the demographic, and what type of event it is will definitely kind of influence what avenue you go down to do that. But you must make it a feature, a fun, engaging feature.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to wrap my head around that, because bottom line, I don't think there's anyone, I mean, whoever it was that asked the question, don't worry, I don't think there's anyone in the audience who's going to go, hang about, I'm not familiar with this idea of not writing this down I'm only familiar with writing it down on a pledge card. These tablets are all very unfamiliar to me. I'm out of my comfort zone. I'm not going to give. That I can almost 100% guarantee that's not going to be the case. So don't worry. Your audience, they might remember writing a pledge last year. They may not. It was a year ago. What they will probably do is embrace this fun, new, exciting concept you've created, which is actually a much, much easier way to do things. And hopefully they'll actually see that you guys are, actually doing a little bit more sort of planning and I don't know, like sort of creative thinking of how to make this more of a fun process. I think most people who've been part of a pledge drive with paddles or pen and paper, who are familiar with that, will probably look to your next event, and if you're utilizing Givergy, say, fair play to this organization. They're really bringing it to the 21st century and making it fun. And I don't think anyone's going to panic that they're not familiar with it.
And just on that note, however you're kind of executing it, as many of you know, Givergy does provide a team. So if there are any guests that are uncomfortable at the start, we also, we have that team there to kind of put their mind at ease. And we've got another question here. As well as pushing the pledge drive through the MC, what other low-cost tools can I use to get guests to donate to the cause without hounding them? Any thoughts on that, Harry?
So repeat the question one more time. I just want to make sure I'm not getting this wrong.
So as well as pushing the pledge through the MC, what other low-cost tools can I use to get the guests to donate to the cause without hounding them? So obviously we don't want guests to be hounded.
I mean, it's a good question. For me, I really feel like the pledge drive, it should just be a succinct moment. It shouldn't, you just get it done, make it fun, and challenge the room, you hit goals, and then you move on. I don't like these ideas of having, pledge options open for the whole year, and people have to text in numbers, and because if you leaving something open for longer doesn't mean more money. It might be over time a more cost-effective way of having running a pledge drive, but it's actually not. Even closing silent auctions earlier with an audience that's engaged is going to get better results. You're going to get much more bidding activity towards the end because people know there's a definite time at the end that's going to close it out. I mean, when it comes to the drive itself, cost-effective tools, I love challenging tables to have maximum participation, utilizing things like sponsor. If Moet Chandon is sponsoring the event, why not challenge the room that the first 3 tables with 100% participation will receive a magnum of Moet to share or something. That sort of thing goes down to the mouth.
That's a favourite of mine. I like seeing that as well. Harry, I think we've just got time for one more question.
Yeah.
So another question came through is, how do you set the right goal amount? So do you suggest having a thermometer to show how much is being raised? So that's another question that come through.
Yeah, I personally do. I like to challenge the audience with a fair and reasonable target. Always make it ambitious and larger than the year before, ideally if you have a comparable guest list and size event and so on. But that's just me because it's in my I like it. There's a relatively competitive element to me, as I'm sure you're probably laughing at that, Jack. As you know, there's a bit of a competitive element to me, so I like having the challenge of hitting goals. And you know, some people veer away from it because they're scared that they're not going to hit the target. And I think that's going in at the wrong way. You know, if someone forced me to run a marathon one day, and I've been asked by God knows how many people to do it, you know, if someone forced me, eventually what I'd do is, having caved and had a little cry, I'd sit down and work out what my goal is. What do I want to do? How fast do I want to run again? And how do I go about executing that? What's the training routine, and how am I going to deliver? So having that goal is the first thing I'd do. And I think, you know, just like with running a marathon or any type of goal, you know, setting those targets is key, because otherwise you don't know what you're working towards. And if you smash through the goal, you know, especially if you have the Givergy system there, you can up the goal immediately. I often will call out to the tech team, you know, let's change it to 150,000, you know, or change it, let's up it. You know, 50 wasn't enough, they want more, we need 75, let's just change it and let the thermometer drop back down. Worst case scenario is if you're not hitting the target and you're a little bit off it. The worst case scenario is you can make an anonymous pledge yourself and make sure you hit the goal, so that the visual moment is there and everyone can. I've never ever had to do that, but that is the worst case scenario. But at least you know you've exhausted the whole room financially as best you possibly can, and people are still leaving feeling good. And just have it in your notes for next year that maybe you went a bit too heavy.
Interesting. Yeah, that's really great stuff. Well, I think that's, Harry, I think that's probably time for all the questions. But I personally just wanted to say a massive thank you to you for coming on board on this webinar and getting involved and providing some, you know, really great stuff for our Canadian partners today. So really thank you for that. Thanks, Harry. For everyone listening, if you do have any questions, you can email us at ca.inquiries@givergy.com, or visit the website at givergy.com/fundraise. Thanks again so much for everybody for listening today and getting involved. Please fire over your questions, give us a call, and we'll be happy to help.
Yeah, and thank you all for tuning in. I do work in Canada as well, so if there's any events that maybe I can support you with, I'd be all ears. And if not, you know, let's get Jack up on stage. Enough of you know him. I think he'd be fantastic, and he knows the system inside out. So sorry, Jack, I've just plugged you.
You've just thrown in the deep end. Thanks, buddy.
I've also just launched your career on stage, so you are welcome.
All right, guys. Thanks so much.
Bye-bye.
See ya.